welcome to the Empowered Mothers Network podcast, supporting mothers to be the best version of themselves. I'm Sarah and this is episode 19 and it's called Motherhood and Creativity. So in this episode we will be talking about why it's difficult to be creative as a mother, and as well as the importance of continuing to be creative whilst in going through the process of motherhood, even in sort of the early days. And then we'll go over a few tips and practices for mums where you can maybe incorporate a bit more creativity back possibly into your life, and also talk about the practicalities of finding the time to actually create, especially if you have got small children, because I know it's really hard. So stay tuned for that. So firstly, I'm going to say, what am I meaning by creative? So I think nowadays it can be seen like a creative person is somebody who just either paints or writes or does something similar to those kind of things. And then, the rest of everybody else is not creative in some way. I don't know why. It's like you think of a creative person, you think of someone who's writing or painting or drawing or sat in a field, making something. I don't know. But I think, we're all creative. We all are. That's the whole point of us being a human, and in this body, in this lifetime, we all create in some way. And as here, we're all mothers, we all have created in some way. So when I talk about that journey of being a mother and a creative, I think, personally, I think that applies to every single one of us. And creativity is it's messy, and I don't just mean messy as in, getting paints everywhere and making a mess. I mean, it's, as a process, it's messy. As a path to kind of gain clarity of what your creative pulling is, it's messy, just like motherhood as a path is messy. So the two are kind of intertwined, because you can't really have one without the other anyway. But I think, as mothers, we do tend to lose sight of the creative part of ourselves and being able to work with that. In my own personal journey, I think creativity and spirituality have been kind of intertwined, and I've tried in the past 4 years, I think 2 different times I tried to set up a therapy business, and the latest time I tried, then life took a different turn, and then all the kids came along, and creativity and this kind of spiritual side of me as well, that kind of life took somewhat of a back seat whilst the kids were young, because I was just sort of in survival mode at that point, as I think most of us are. You sort of just so caught up in trying to provide for a baby, and then maybe a baby and a toddler, and there's not much room left for yourself, as we've discussed in other podcast episodes, and I've written in other blog posts. So everything like that for me took a real backseat, and it's only been sort of recently that everything sort of creativity and spirituality wise has started to come back out again, because I really had to sit on it for a few years while I just got on with raising my kids. So I can understand from the outset, when we talk about how to be creative and be a mother, it can seem impossible in the early days. It can seem impossible if you've got a baby or a very young child. So it's being realistic as well about what stage of motherhood that you are at currently, because beyond decorating your toddler's lunch so it's all nicely presented, it looks like a smiley face, or putting on your best accent for a bedtime story, it can be extremely difficult to find that time. Definitely time, I think, when you're a mother, to really sit and be creative, because a lot of the times most types of creativity will take up a lot of kind of headspace, heart space. You need that time where you're not having somebody come in and constantly interrupt your flow, because it's then difficult to really get into that state of creative flow that you kind of need to be in to do a lot of things, for example like painting and drawing. So yeah, in terms of creativity, probably the biggest factor is probably time, isn't it? Finding the time to do what you love and to create beyond your children. There's also the mental load of motherhood, which is fairly self-explanatory when you're in the baby stage and you've got somebody demanding your attention 24/7, and the mental pressures of that. But also going forwards, I've found, now I've got kids in school, there's still so much of load in terms of school admin and life admin for your kids, and then if you've got more than one kid, it all starts adding up, and oh god. So yeah, there is a lot of a mental load there of motherhood. So when you're feeling really full on to-do list, it can be difficult to switch off from mum mode, as it were, and get into that kind of creative flow again. And there's a third aspect of why it can be difficult to be creative as a mother, which is that of pressures and expectations from society and maybe your wider circle of family, friends, things like that, but mainly from society. So I think we've all probably come across the odd mum here and there who is in touch with a creative flow and maybe has a good network of support around her to help with the children, and is able to really take some time out and get into flow with that. And this can be something where she's shot down by other mums, for, if you want to say, if it's jealousy or simply that we've been told by society, we've been brainwashed and forced into that belief that we can't have both, that we have to have one or the other. You may have tried to do that for yourself, take some time out to devote to being creative and getting into flow and pursuing your own creative projects, and found that it can bring up guilt that we're not doing our other job, our mum job. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure out there, and we can kind of feel damned if you do and damned if you don't at times. So it can be really easy just to do what I probably did when my girls were young, really, which was, kind of let creativity, spirituality, whatever, take a back seat, and just stay in survival mode and crack on, and not try and factor in this whole extra thing of how do I get this in my life. But creativity in motherhood is important, I think, for many of us will need that creative expression, if not all of us would need that creative expression, to really improve our mental health. So even if you take, and it doesn't seem creative on the outlet, but if you are having a tough day with the kids and your mental health is being affected, and you just go out into nature or take a quick walk and get fresh air, we've all sort of done that, where we've just broken out for a while, got a walk, got some air, and come back, and it's just been enough to clear our heads, and feel a little bit more grounded and centered. And I think we get a lot of that energy from creativity as well. And if we are creative beings, if we've got creativity within us that wants to come out, it doesn't necessarily go, oh, okay, I can see you have a toddler and a baby to look after right now, so I'll just go away for a few years. It's kind of there, and the more we kind of ignore it and push it away and don't let it out, it can make us feel blocked, in many areas of our lives, and also tend to manifest physically as well on some level eventually. So it's important that when we have that creative urge, as I think many of us do, is that we can express it and let it out, and that gives us a positive impact on our mental health, which then ties into setting an example for our children, because if they see us sort of getting into our creative flow and doing something that, you know, really lights us up, then they're going to think that that's normal and that's okay. Whereas if we don't, and we sort of shoehorn that down, and, you know, we didn't see mum doing anything that she loved to do, anything that lit her up. She was just always very, you know, focused on keeping the house clean and preparing meals and all that. Well, you can get creativity from preparing meals, but a lot of the time it's just a rush job in day-to-day life. But yeah, if your kids see that side of you and the more sort of robotic side, then they're going to think that's normal. So it's what facet of yourself do you want to show to your children, and let them see that is there? Because when they come to be in your position, they're going to have the same pulls and pushes of life, and then, you know, they'll have certain beliefs by then, and do we want to contribute to beliefs that get them in the flow, or beliefs that maybe limit them in some way? So creative practices for mums. So if we're talking about that, again, if we go straight from one end of the spectrum to the other, say, I haven't had any time for creativity in my life, I can't find time to get into flow or whatever, and then say, right, okay, I'm going to bring creativity to my life. You can't then jump maybe straight into, you know, sitting there for half a day and painting a full-blown picture, or, you know, writing even several thousand words. I think we've got to kind of, again, be realistic with what stage of motherhood we're at. So, you know, you might, if you've got young children, you're very short on time. If you've got older children, you might also have a job as well, so you've got to factor that in. But even just like short, excuse me, even just short manageable activities just to get you going, it's always like the first brick or the first step that we need to look at, and not the whole journey. So if we look at the very first step that you could take, it could be something as simple as like a daily journaling practice. And God, for me, like, journaling it's hard to explain, because it has really helped in shifting my life, and getting back in touch with like creative and spiritual side. So it has really helped with that, but it's hard to sort of explain how directly, because I just have like, 5-10 minutes at the end of the day where I'll do a bit of journaling and maybe write one page of A4 at lunchtime or in the middle of the day. So that journaling is really, really useful. Even if you're just splooging your thoughts down, it can seem at the beginning like it's not creative, you're just writing a load of dross. But if you keep going and you keep persistent and consistent with it, it can start to become more creative, and also help you get back into that kind of flow state as well. So that's a good one if you're like, you sort of like writing and things like that. If you're like visual into drawing, even something simple as like doing some doodles every day, or doing a little sketch, you know, getting out. Something that I enjoyed during lockdown, I think, was like getting out and just going in the garden and sketching like one plant or something each day. Yeah, it's just finding little ways to incorporate creativity into your daily routine. So again, it might be your where you do your toddler's lunch and make it into a smiley face or whatever. So it might be something through cooking you feel you can get into a creative flow. You might say, if you've got a bit of support with the kids, like 1-2 times a week, you'll just, create a new meal or something, do a new recipe, or reading for 10 minutes a day. So actually, for daily routines and micro habits, which I have a blog post about, I found that like doing something for 10 minutes a day consistently really helps. So just you can get like an app called The Fabulous, I think, and that can help you like set little routines and habits that you can do until they become kind of second nature and ingrained. You set them if you set something for a specific time of the day, so like if you have a little morning routine, so you might do something for creativity or writing or reading for 10 minutes, either like in the morning after you get up, before the kids get up, or like when the kids have gone to bed, before you go to bed. If you set something to do at the same time each day, or for a couple of days of the week, Monday to Friday or something, you have that consistent time, then your brain becomes trained. So, like, another example is if you have a morning cup of coffee at the same time every day, could you tag anything on before or after or during that morning cup of coffee that you could then build into a habit? And then every time you go and, because at the moment you probably subconsciously then go and put the kettle on for your cup of coffee because you know it's coffee time, could you then tag something on to that? And then eventually, as you keep repeating that, your brain will just associate that, I've put the kettle on for coffee, it's time to do reading or writing. Another one is trying to build your own creative time in during like kids' activities. So, like, for example, sometimes my girls will sit at the table and do colouring if it's a rainy day, and if I'm not lost in my household tasks again, which is really easy, then sometimes I will sit with them and, like, I've got my own grown-up colouring book, so could you draw a picture or do a bit of a sketch there, or even just do some colouring with the kids, something creative whilst they're doing something creative. If they've got the time and made the time to do something creative, why can't you? So making use of those small pockets of time you've got throughout the day wherever you can. Also, like, connecting with other mothers as well. So, perhaps there's a few of you into the same sort of thing. You could get involved in like a little creative group, which, could be like in an evening or a weekend or something. Or even if you've got young children, get your kids all sort of to play together and try and do something a little bit creative then. It's just thinking outside the box, I think. And then the final thing I kind of want to address is probably more for people who've really been creative before they've had kids, and now are really struggling to like find the time and the motivation and the effort to get back into that creative flow with whatever kind of medium you do, whether it's writing or drawing or painting or dance or whatever it is. I think a lot of us then feel blocked coming back out when we do get a little bit more time. We still feel a bit blocked, and I think then because we've kind of had that time where we've stopped and gone and devoted ourselves to our kids for a bit, we can then let like perfectionism creep in, and also a little bit of procrastination as well. So it can be, you might have a little bit more time to do like a doodle or something, but then not a full-blown picture. And the perfectionism of, wanting to sit and just create and it be straight away like a fantastic picture. We've got to make sure we keep a check on the perfectionism side of things and the expectations we have, which might be that we are a creative person and output creatively as we did before the kids or the child or however many children came along, which might not be a realistic expectation anymore. And also the expectation of how much we can juggle. And I did talk a little bit in my podcast about duties, the call of duty, changing the game, about what our duties actually are and what we take on and what we choose to take on and maybe what aren't our things to take on. And again, with creativity, I think we've got to really make time for it where we can. And it might be that to get more into the flow and to get where you want to be expectation-wise of your own creative outputs and flow, that you have to sacrifice something else, or you have to let something else take a back seat. So it's that prioritization of what's most important to you in your life, getting the dishes done or going and doing something artistic or going and producing a little piece of writing or a blog post. There's so many things we have to juggle. I've talked about that in spinning plates as well. So many things we have to juggle, and something inevitably will probably have to give or take a back seat or a hiatus for a bit. So I think in terms of creativity in the early days, just looking for those pockets of time, and as you go forward, you'll probably find that them pockets of time, increase a little bit. Just being realistic with expectations, and trying to prioritise your creative flow, so that you don't feel blocked, not only creatively but also in other areas of life. Again, because this is something that kids will probably pick up on as well. And being kind of gentle with yourself and meeting yourself where you're at, and not trying to run down the road of wanting to produce or forcing yourself to produce as well. There's that balance between carving out some time to say, right, this time is for myself and for myself to be creative, and also that thing of pushing yourself into, I need to produce a full blog post in the next hour or this afternoon or something. It's finding that balance of letting yourself be creative but also not forcing yourself to do it. It's not a production line. So meeting yourself where you're at and looking for creative opportunities and open doors when they come up in your life as well. So I would love to know, because I struggle with this as well, I would love to know where you are at on your creative and or motherhood journey. If you've got any tips that you find useful for letting creativity into your own life, maybe you like draw with your kids or whatever, or you've got some other tips to share, then you can share them in the comments below. As ever, if you want to join the network, you can join the network and get the fortnightly Empowered Mothers Network journal if you sign up at the website empoweredmothersnetwork.com, or you can just subscribe here on YouTube if you're watching this, and get the latest podcast episodes through that. And I think we should be on, by the time this goes out, it'll all be on Spotify and Apple and all major podcast distributors anyway. So thank you very much for watching or listening, and I will see you for the next episode.